I want to welcome everyone to the subcommittee's hearing on sustaining the force challenges to readiness. Today we have the opportunity to discuss not only the current state of our logistical and maintenance readiness, but to also look at how we are posturing the force to the future. Joining us today are four exceptional witnesses representing the Army, Marine Corps, U.S. Transportation Command, and the Defense Logistics Agency. They are Lieutenant General Mitch H. Stevenson, the Deputy Chief of Staff, Logistics, U.S. Army; Lieutenant General Frank A. Panner, Jr., Deputy Commandant, Installations and Logistics, U.S. Marine Corps; Major General Michelle D. Johnson, U.S. Air Force Director of Strategy, Policy, Programs, and Logistics, U.S. Transportation Command; and Brigadier General Lynn A. Collier, U.S.A. Director of Logistics Operations, Defense Logistics Agency. These four distinguished officers are responsible for transporting, sustaining, and supporting our forces both at home and abroad. They are charged not only with ensuring our men and women have what they need when they need it, but are also responsible for ensuring we are postured to respond effectively to future real-world contingencies like we've seen recently in Haiti and Japan. We're truly honored to have you join us today, and we are extremely grateful for all you do to keep this nation safe. Thank you all for your service. Our subcommittee's hearings over the last couple of months have highlighted the many potential global threats and challenges our military faces. There is no doubt that our military is under significant strain, but they are performing marvelously despite the many challenges they face. However, the work of this subcommittee is to not only ensure our force can continue to excel in Iraq and Afghanistan, but that it also is postured to respond to a myriad of potential challenges around the world, both in the near term and in the long term. Today, the Department of Defense has more than 450,000 personnel abroad in support of our national interest. In CENTCOM alone, the U.S. has more than 150,000 brave men and women engaged in ongoing operations. These complex operations are sure to present significant logistical and maintenance challenges well beyond the President's stated goal for redeployment of combat forces from the region. I hope that this hearing will allow members to learn more about how we are meeting these current challenges, while at the same time posturing ourselves for significant challenges we are certain to face in the future. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses, and now I'd like to recognize the gentlelady from Guam for any remarks she may have. Ms. Burdella.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. To all our witnesses today, I look forward to your testimonies. Today we are a nation at war, confronting threats on every continent with some 3.2 million soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and civilian personnel deployed or stationed at 5,000 different locations worldwide. Supporting this robust and geographically dispersed force requires the significant logistics and maintenance capabilities embodied in the organizations represented by our witnesses here today. As we continue to draw down forces in Iraq, support troops on the ground in Afghanistan, support humanitarian missions in Japan, and support efforts to attain democracy in Libya, these activities will test the ability of our military logistics enterprise to get this done right and in a timely manner. Given the austerity of today's national budget, we must conduct these logistics operations in the most cost-effective manner that is possible. All these requirements must be fulfilled simultaneously with the best possible support of our warfighters, but also with an eye on the value to the taxpayer. I believe that we have the ability to accomplish these daunting tasks, but it is going to take a tremendous coordinated effort with military and civilian leaders thinking outside the box to get this done right. I believe it is our role in Congress to make sure that you have the tools you need to accomplish all these requirements and fulfill your missions successfully. I also believe that our witnesses will have to look closely at their own internal processes to make alterations that will allow for successful completion of these missions. Internal efficiencies are the quickest and sometimes the best way to accomplish the multitude of tasks that are set before you. In particular, I look forward to hearing more from the witnesses on the logistical challenges within the Afghanistan and Pakistan and options regarding use of the Northern Distribution Network to move personnel and material in support of our troops in Afghanistan. Now, some might say that Guam is isolated, but I've been to Afghanistan. a number of times, and its geography, I believe, makes it a far more isolated location. I understand that there are significant interagency and technical challenges associated with supply chains into and out of Afghanistan. I hope our witnesses can discuss how this system can be strengthened before the inevitable drawdown of forces in Afghanistan. Again, what can Congress do to facilitate this process and give you all the tools that you need to succeed? Additionally, I hope that our witnesses from the Army and Marine Corps can discuss their management of workflow at military depots across the country as the op-tempo of the wars slows. A recent congressionally directed report from LMI, the Government Consulting on Future Depot Maintenance Requirements, highlights some transformational changes that will need to occur to keep these critical capabilities viable as more modern weapons systems are integrated into the force. I welcome comments from our witnesses on this report and what steps are currently being taken to transform the depot business model. If you believe that adjustments are needed in the statutory framework underlying depot operations, we would also be very interested in getting your input in that regard. So again, I thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity, and I look forward to the testimonies.
Thank you for those remarks, Madeline. And as we discussed prior to the hearing, I ask unanimous consent that we dispense with the 5-minute rule for this hearing and depart from regular order so that members may ask questions during the course of the discussion. I think this will provide a roundtable type forum and will enhance the dialogue on this very important issue. Without objection, so ordered. We begin today once again thanking all of you for your service to our country and for taking time to come here. We have your written remarks. They're going to be made a part of the record, and oftentimes in written remarks we use those to kind of validate what we're doing, and that's what we should be doing. We want to give you each, though, about 5 minutes. You can take less or you can take a little bit more, but to tell us from your own viewpoint what your biggest concerns are with readiness. What do we need to be looking at? All of us on here appreciate the logistical side of this. We understand that in any fight, that, part of the effort that we have is how long we can sustain that fight. And that comes down to something that's often not very sexy. People don't like to really read reports about it and look at it, but it's the logistics. It's how we maintain our fleet, maintain our planes, maintain our equipment, get supplies there. The logistical part of it determines whether we win or lose, and you guys are on the forefront of that. You don't hear it enough, so we want to make sure corporately as a subcommittee we're telling you all thank you for what you've done in your careers and what you continue to do. General Stevenson, if it's okay, we'll start with you since you just happened to pick the slot on that side. And if you would, I'd like to recognize you for 5 minutes or how long you feel appropriate.
Well, thank you, Chairman Forbes and Ranking Member Bordallo. I won't take the full 5 minutes, but I did want to hit a few high points from what's in my opening remarks. The reason why we're here today is to answer the question, are we ready? And I think in just one sentence, I would tell you that, in my view, the Army is more ready and better prepared than we've been in a long, long time, certainly in my 37 years in the Army. And we'll get even better in the coming years for a number of reasons, and I'd be happy to get into that. We are on track to complete our drawdown from Iraq by the end of the year, and we're also, I think, doing reasonably well in sustaining our forces in Afghanistan, despite the challenges that Ms. Bordallo mentioned. Here at home, we are working very hard on improving ammunition readiness. I would tell you our ammunition readiness is probably in the best shape it's been in since right after the Cold War. We are reconstituting our Army preposition stocks, probably 2/3 of the way through with that. And we are, ma'am, as you pointed out, that you asked us to be, we are working hard to be better stewards of our taxpayer dollars. And a good example of that is the ongoing property accountability campaign we have ongoing in the Army, which will also, of course, contribute to readiness. Just a couple of final thoughts. You've probably heard testimony from various members of the Army and other services over the past several years that said that, we're going to need dollars, appropriations, to reset for 2 to 3 years after the end of combat operations, and that is still true today. And I can, if there's time and you're interested, I can walk you through why it does take that long. And it does go to why we have a lesser requirement for reset dollars in fiscal 12 than we had perhaps in previous years. And lastly, you asked about our challenges. The things that probably are the biggest challenges on my scope right now are supporting dispersed unit operations in Afghanistan. It seems like every day we uncover a new challenge that we've got to work with there. That's certainly a challenge for us. Redistributing our Army property, a lot of the reasons why we don't look as ready as I believe we are is because we've got maldistributed property. And there are a lot of good reasons for why that is, and we are on the path to get better. And lastly, to do something about energy consumption. We've got to improve and get better at that. Although if you were to compare the services, Army energy consumption isn't as high as others, we know that we still can do better, and we want to do that. Thank you for your support. You have made us ready through the terrific support we've gotten over the past years, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, General. General Panner.
Chairman Forbes, Representative Bordeaux, and other distinguished members, thank you for the opportunity this morning to talk about the state of equipment and material readiness in the United States Marine Corps. On behalf of all the Marines, families, and our civilian Marines, thank you for the unwavering support you have provided for the last 9 to 10 years as our troops have been engaged in combat. We have a high readiness rating forward in Afghanistan. I think you know that, but that has come at a cost. Our equipment aboard our home stations has been heavily taxed, and after this almost a decade of combat operations, our average readiness ratings at home stations hover around 65%. We have accepted that risk so we could properly support the forces forward. We continue to globally source equipment for Afghanistan throughout the Marine Corps, and if there is additional contingency that appears on the horizon, that's the approach we take. We globally source it in the Marine Corps so we can respond appropriately. We do have some challenges I'd like to share with you this morning. One of them, much like General Stevenson mentioned, we need your support when the time comes for reset from Afghanistan. You may well know that we got out of Iraq last year. We're about to conclude the reset actions for that equipment we pulled out of Iraq. We transferred, or we swung over about 50% of the table equipment from Iraq to Afghanistan. So that equipment set is in Afghanistan as we speak, and by that action it delayed our original reset plan, but we're adjusting to that. We're consistently and constantly readjusting our reset plan. Another issue, as I just mentioned, is the readiness rating of our home station units hovers around 65%. We accepted that risk early on. Another area is the reconstitution effort beyond reset that we would ask your help for. We have learned through Iraq and Afghanistan that before we went into the war, we now know we have legacy tables of equipment. The nature of modern combat requires that we enhance these tables of equipment. For example, comm equipment, communication equipment. We have learned that we require almost 7-fold of communication equipment from what we've done in Iraq and Afghanistan as compared to our old table of equipment. Lastly, one of our strategic programs, our Maritime Pre-Position Program, our MIPSRON, Commandant has instructed me to protect the readiness rating as much as we can with that. Originally, we did use some of the equipment off the MIPSRON for Iraq. We have since replaced that. In general, our attainment rates for MIPSRON are greater than 90%. It's in the 95% area. There is equipment in our MPF program, Maritime Preposition Force, that it does require to be modernized. And this is part of that reconstitution effort. We do run the equipment through our regular maintenance cycles to update as we can as the equipment is available. But we would ask for your continued support to update that equipment. In closing, and I mean this sincerely on behalf of all our Marines, their families, thank you for your support. Our Marines are doing, much like other service members, doing some great things out there in the defense of this nation. We will ensure that we are prepared to meet any additional assigned missions for future contingencies. And with your help, we can. Thank you.
General, thank you. General Johnson.
Good morning, Chairman and Ranking Member Boidayo. Thank you so much for your time yesterday and for your time today. It's an honor to be able to address this committee and to be able to represent U.S. Transportation Command at the side of the leaders of logistics in the Army and the Marine Corps, and at the side of our partner, Defense Logistics Agency, because Transportation Command looks globally. We link the air, sea, land transportation capabilities with the supply capabilities that DLA provides, so that we can provide a worldwide network to support our forces in all the global areas. As you mentioned, ma'am, earlier, we are in a far-flung situation now. As our national military strategy says, more and more will be asked to act in a complex, far-flung environment and to be able to operate indefinitely at the end of very long lines of operation and supply. Afghanistan represents probably the longest possible line of supply you could achieve in a landlocked country that, with no ports, as Guam has ports at least, that has access that way. So again, not as remote there, but surrounded by the highest mountains in the world and with no infrastructure. And so to address, if I may, just briefly, it was a question you actually put in your opening statement, how can we continue to support such far-flung places and continue also to anticipate other contingencies across the globe, even while focusing on Afghanistan? And that's the stock and trade of TRANSCOM. So we try to look for options every day. Pakistan presents challenges in its approaches to Afghanistan, so we've found access through the north, through countries that we didn't normally or used to have relationships with in the past, through Central Asia. Russia has been a very supportive partner. That route begins in the Baltics, who have been partners with us for a long time. We have approaches through Central Asia, and we are therefore able to supply over 100,000 troops in Afghanistan. So distance has a tyranny to it. The sheer volume to support 100,000 forces is a burden on the forces who have to receive that, to receive all that good and try to put it into place on the forward operating bases. So we work together with Central Command and with the services, and frankly with European Command, to support that theater, but also to be ready to swing our forces to where they're needed elsewhere, for instance, in Japan, to be able to pivot forces over, whether the commercial forces, and that's who supported it most immediately, our commercial air carriers, to be able to help us with the departures of family members from Japan, and to be ready in case we needed to do more of an evacuation. And at the direction of the PACOM commander, we could do so with surface resources, perhaps, whether commercial or organic. Our active duty forces have a certain amount of resource in aircraft and ships, but if we need to mobilize the reserves, we can also mobilize the reserves. We have many options along those lines, and we try to preserve those options. And then when activity arises in North Africa, to be able to swing as well and to support European Command and AFRICOM in those ways. And so it's a constant dynamic interplay between the Joint Staff, TRANSCOM, DLA, the services, and the combatant commands to understand the priorities of our nation and to be able to respond appropriately and as creatively as we possibly can. And in so doing, we've really become an information command, if you will, to be able to convey openly what we need to do with commercial partners, interagency partners, international partners. And in so doing, we do those on non-secure networks most of the time. And so in many ways, we're very vulnerable on the cybersecurity front. And so if I would say there are challenges that we face, challenges of distance, challenges of relationships internationally, and we'll appreciate Congress's understanding of our new relationships with countries with whom we haven't dealt as much before. And also on the cyber front, I know this committee has been very interested in defense industrial base, and one aspect of that is the membership of defense industrial base in the cyber activities of Department of Defense, to be able to share challenges and to understand that the weak point in any one of our partners is therefore the weak part of the system. So if a malactor wanted to get into the system to a clear defense contractor, it could affect the entire program. So the more partnerships we have with the commercial sector on all fronts, the better. So again, I look forward to the discussion. I value and treasure the opportunity to speak to you today and the opportunity to represent the over 150,000 members of United States Transportation Command from all the services as well as commercial partners and the Merchant Marines. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you, General. General Collier.
Chairman Forbes, Ms. Bordallo, it is my privilege also to speak to you today on representing the 27,000 men and women of the Defense Logistics Agency. As the Director of Logistics Operations, I would like to tell you we are primarily a civilian organization. About 23,000 of those, or 25,000 of those personnel are civilians. Just over 500 active duty military and about 750 reserve military. And as such, relatively small compared to our service counterparts and again our transportation U.S. Transcom partner. We are a critical part of the supply chain, though, as we are represented in both overseas areas and throughout CONA supporting the industrial base. We have personnel in 48 of the 50 states and about 28 countries overseas. On a daily basis, we supply about 55,000 requisitions in support of the services and execute over 10,000 different contracts, many through automated means, but over 10,000 contracts per day. And we do that to support approximately 1,900 weapon systems, whether it be aviation, land, or maritime, and we supply about 85% of those parts, along with approximately almost 100% of the food, fuel, and other commodities that the services need. We're funded through the Working Capital Fund, which means that the services pay for our support, and therefore it is very, very important that we optimize both the effectiveness of what we do, but balance that with efficiency. And I think we have continually tried to execute that overseas. We now operate 26 depots around the world. We've increased that number over the last few years as we have added depots in Kuwait supporting the Iraq campaign, in Afghanistan, in Kandahar, Afghanistan, supporting there. That allows us to move things, slow, low-dollar items by surface and take them out of the air supply chain. In my written statement, I provided a relatively comprehensive look, but we provide primarily Class 1 and Class 3 food and fuel to the forces through prime vendors. Along with our ability to stretch those, we have worldwide contracts with an extensive vendor base in most all commodities that allows us to support not only the present theater, but any of the contingency operations that we are also supporting. You've heard the challenges and you've seen the challenges in Afghanistan, the landlocked country, infrastructure being one of the key things that we've had to overcome. And again, working with all of our partners, we have really balanced or tried to balance what we provide through the PAC-G lock with the NDN and with other multimodal means of providing as much of the transportation by ship and then flying in the last leg of that, minimizing that air requirement as much as we can. Along with setting up those depots, which have allowed us to support directly from the AOR instead of having items come from the United States. I'd like to just close by saying, although we only have 27,000 people, we presently have a continued increase in mission in Afghanistan or in Iraq, specifically with a disposition in our disposition yards as the drawdown takes place. With some of our dwell issues with the military personnel and the limited military, we've had over 800 volunteers throughout the agency to deploy to the AOR within just the last 3 weeks. So it speaks volumes for the morale and desire to support of all of our personnel along with that of our services. And we have the capability to support not only a change of forces in Iraq as we continue to draw down, but also we will support the transition to Department of State through several commodities. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
General, thank you. I want to begin by focusing on a word that General Johnson used, which is partnership. And one of the things that Ms. Bordallo and I were just talking about is how much we appreciate, we talked about your service, but also your willingness to come in here and view this as a partnership. Each of you did what we asked you to do. You gave us a written statement, but then you didn't come in here with prepared canned remarks. You talked to us. And that's what we want this to be today, is a dialogue to get that information out. We were talking, as you were talking, about how encouraging that is that we can have that dialogue and have that partnership. But also, this is, as I've told each of you privately, probably one of the most bipartisan committees or subcommittees, I think, in Congress. We like each other, work very well together. So you've got kind of two partnerships going here, Republicans and Democrats, and we have our Department of Defense and we have Congress. And I think if we do that, it's there's no end to what we can really accomplish. So we thank you for that. And the other thing I want to tell you just logistically, as we talked about earlier, we do something a little bit different. So if one of our members are asking a question, another member has kind of a follow-up on that, we'll let them go ahead and ask that follow-up. And the ranking member's given me some discretion in doing that. We won't allow it to run on, but we just allow that so we can have a fruitful discussion. I'm going to hold my questions until the end so we can get all of our members' questions in. And I'd like to now recognize our ranking member, the gentlelady from Guam, for any questions she may have.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I want to echo the remarks of the chairman. I felt when you speak to us just from your heart and not from a written statement, I think it's much more meaningful. I think you covered some of this, but I'd like to ask the question for any of our witnesses. During a March 2010 hearing before the House Appropriations Committee Defense Subcommittee, GAO identified several challenges, and I think you mentioned these, in distributing supplies and equipment to U.S. forces in Afghanistan. Now, these challenges included difficulties with transporting cargo through neighboring countries, limited airfield infrastructure within Afghanistan, lack of full visibility over supply and equipment movements into and around Afghanistan, lack of coordination as well as competing logistics priorities in a coalition environment, uncertain requirements, and low transportation priority for contractors. Now, given all these challenges, what does it look like today, and is there any one of these that stand out? What steps have been taken to mitigate some of these challenges? And what metrics are being used to gauge the effectiveness of the supply chain and the distribution processes in delivering required material to deployed forces in Afghanistan? I guess whichever one of you would like to answer that.
There's
Admiral?
quite a few challenges, ma'am, in your statement there. Let me just hit a few high points, and then it would ask the others, particularly General Johnson, who is in large measure the one helping us overcome these challenges. We know that it's difficult to get into and out of Afghanistan. So one of the things we've done in the Army is we've told units, when you get in there and it's time for you to be replaced, leave your equipment there. The new unit will fall in on top of it. You go back home to the United States and we'll get you replacement equipment. Sounds real easy, rolls right off the tongue, a little tough to do. But it does keep equipment off the roads and therefore not subject to pilferage and not subject to the limited road networks and air networks that we have there. So that's one thing we've done to mitigate. Another is to just limit the amount of things that units take over there with them. There's a lot, when you deploy to a place like that, you're going to fight. The tendency is to take, everything you could possibly think you might need in the next year. And it ends up being hundreds of containers. And we've had to step in with units and say, look, have some confidence in the supply chain. When you develop a need there, we'll get it to you, but don't try to deploy with, 1,000 containers in a brigade, for example. And so our Forces commanders put out some very deliberate guidance about that, and that's helping mitigate, because if you reduce the amount of stuff that's got to flow through the soda straw, then it flows easier. We've added in-transit visibility. We're about to, starting this summer, we're going to add satellite tagging to that equipment which must transit on the ground. We don't put anything on the ground that we care about. No ammunition goes on the ground. No sensitive material goes on the ground. That all flies in. But that which has to go on the ground, we're going to put satellite tags on it so that we can have real-time visibility as to where this cargo is. If it stops at a place it shouldn't stop, we'll know immediately or nearly immediately and then can take appropriate action. And I could keep going, but I'd rather let General Johnson talk a little bit about what TRANSCOM is doing.
And what you mentioned then has been quite successful.
I'd say reasonably successful. I don't want to overstate how successful we are. We've been challenged. We've had pilferage.
That's right.
But reasonably successful, I think.
Anyone else like to comment?
Yes, ma'am. If I could, I appreciate General Stevenson's noting the actions the Army has taken itself to provide discipline in the process. One of the things that we can benefit from being a very wealthy country is to have a logistical tail, but sometimes it can be a burden in the sheer volume. And so I really respect the way the Army is managing their massive force. There's a lot of need for 100,000 people in theater. So as he pointed out, we fly in sensitive, lethal equipment as we can, and so that's able to be keep things off the road and keep it safe. We also airdrop in an increasing amount. Last year, we dropped over 60 million tons of equipment via airdrop, often to very remote forward operating bases, and we're trying to be creative so that we don't have to have very expensive equipment that we need to recover later. In fact, we take low-cost, low-altitude chutes, parachutes that are maybe reused from some other purpose, and dropping them at a very low level, a very low speed, so that troops don't have to subject themselves to harm in a hazardous environment of a forward operating base, and they can still get the equipment that they need, or the medicine, or the food, or the water that they need. This year, we anticipate 100 million tons of equipment airdropped. Again, it's more secure, it's more accurate, it's more safe for all concerned. So we've taken that effort. The pilferage General Stevenson alludes to exists, and probably in all fairness, any of us could look at our own home states or any place with human beings involved. There might be some, but obviously we don't want to lose anything on our lines of communication to theater. 1% is what we're showing, and we think that's a fairly accurate figure, but 1% of 8,000 to 9,000 containers at any given day is dozens. And if it's yours, you don't want to lose it. By containers, I mean the back of a semi-trailer truck size of container we're talking. On the northern distribution net, we've put more and more of our volume as we can to try to reduce the risk in Pakistan. So we have upwards of 10,000 to 12,000 containers en route from the northern distribution net at any given day, and that's been a very secure route. There have been really nil pilferage issues, and the attacks have been non-existent as well. And we watch that with great concern, and our intelligence community actually has turned their eyes to these routes as well, because logistics do matter. Logistics are a great asymmetric advantage for our country, and we know that. So intermodally, I really appreciate my colleague General Collier mentioning intermodal options. What does that mean? For instance, MRAP, all-terrain vehicles, you may be familiar with the MATVs. We needed to deliver upwards of 7,000 to 8,000 of them in a short amount of time over the last year. And to fly them in from the United States, after Oshkosh builds them and delivers them to Charleston, South Carolina, and to fly them 4 or 5 at a time on an airplane is prohibitively expensive. But actually, to load maybe 300 of them on a ship, and some of these large ships can hold 200 to 400 C-17 loads, and then send them to a port, maybe in the vicinity, perhaps Bahrain or Oman, and then shuttle the airplanes in a shorter distance, less fuel is required, they can carry more vehicles. We're saving $110 million per 1,000 MATVs delivered. So again, we're trying to use good business practices, be good stewards of tax dollars, and support the warfighter foremost. And so we're nearly finished. We're nearly complete this month. We'll have delivered all over 7,000 of those vehicles. And there are other vehicles in the works and heavy trailers that we're delivering that way. We've used this method elsewhere, and Rota, Spain is an important place. And it illustrates how important one COCOM can be to another. That bases in Europe are actually very important for Central Command from the transportation point of view. If we send shiploads of helicopters to Rota, Spain, and then shuttle on heavy aircraft to Afghanistan, it's efficient, it's effective. Most importantly, it supports the warfighter, but also saves tax dollars as we go. So those are the kinds of creative ways we're trying to work around the challenges that we have. And I'll finish up with the in-transit visibility work. In business, obviously, there's tagging. Some of our foremost companies take advantage of these operations, but it's just not the physical device that goes on the container that senses the location of the device. There's a process that's required for this volume of material coming. And so to the credit of the forces on the ground in Central Command and my counterparts in the logistics community in Central Command, they've taken into account how best to track the inputs from all this data. There's no shortage of data, but how to manage that, make it useful, and have the soldiers and the Marines and the airmen and the sailors on the ground in Afghanistan be able to track the things they're bringing in. And they've also started maintaining cargo yards so that trucks aren't lined up on the roads and vulnerable to attack. And our commercial partners have helped orchestrate that as well, and DLA is helping us work on those lines too. So this is very much a team effort to know what we have, to track what we have, and to have only what the folks on the ground really need.
Thank you, General. I have a quick follow-up to General Stevenson. What about the second-order effect of theater-provided equipment not being returned to the United States for training or equipment that may have been pulled out of the reserve units? How is the Army meeting this challenge?
Yes, ma'am. That's a very good point. And that's sort of what I alluded to in my opening remarks about mal-distributed equipment. Equipment that we've got that we told to stay there in Afghanistan becomes what we refer to as theater-provided equipment. It's not part of any unit table of organization and equipment like General Panner referred to. And so somebody else is doing without because that equipment is sitting there. So that's an impact. Another impact is because we've decided to leave that material there and let units rotate on top of it, it has interrupted what we had planned to do in our depots. And so there's been a workload impact. And then lastly, if you leave unit in country for multiple rotations, there's a point at which you got to take it down and apply some heavy-duty maintenance to it. You know, when you've got a unit going in, they only stay a year, they come out, it's generally not a problem. We'll get it reset and ready for the next operation. But when that equipment stays for multiple rotations, there's a point at which you just got to say, time out, we got to put that equipment into some sort of maintenance facility. And we're building one in Kandahar now to help us do that.
General, do you ever sell equipment to the Afghan military? I mean, you know, where they're training them and so forth. I mean, is there something like that? We do.
There are a number of ways by which we transfer equipment to the Afghans. One is what's called sale from stock. There isn't much of that going on. The Congress authorized us to provide equipment that was excess to our needs to them. I think it was in fiscal year 10 in the authorization bill. And so as a result of that, we've been transferring some equipment to them. And then lastly, there's foreign military sales. It actually ends up being grant money provided by the United States, appropriated by the Congress, that we have people, Army and other service people in country, helping to build their military and decide what they need. You know, as you know, we're building the Afghan Army up into several 100,000 Afghan soldiers. They all need rifles, they all need radios, and they all need transport, and all that stuff is being bought as part of that foreign military sales effort.
Mr. Chairman, on my last trip to Afghanistan with the CODEL, we all received desert boots as a gift made in Afghanistan. So I understand they're now making their own uniforms. Is that a true comment?
Ma'am, it wouldn't surprise me, and it would be a good thing if they are.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The next question will come from our gentleman from New Jersey, but before he does, the gentleman from New York had a quick follow-up question to Ms. Bardalo's question. Mr. Gibson.
I thank Chairman and the Ranking Member, and I thank the panelists. With regard to movement of logistics in theater, my question has to do with are we confident we've learned from the lessons from Iraq as far as rearward movement? The President has laid down the marker to begin the drawdown this year and to complete combat operations by 2014. And please give me some assurances that, because it was Herculean work that was done to move that, how are we applying those lessons and how that might impact reset operations at the completion?
If I may, since we are out of Iraq, and we had some pretty good lessons learned coming out of Iraq, and we thought we had a fairly successful drawdown plan. And some of this is basic leadership. For example, the commander we had on the ground at the time told his subordinate commanders they can't go home until they account for all the equipment. That got everybody's attention. To the degree that we had 110% turn-in as we were getting out of Iraq. Now, that says something about our legacy accounting systems, which is a different issue that we're working and trying to solve, and one of those solutions will be MCCS Marine Corps, our future logistical information backbone. So the commander told everyone equipment accountability. The second thing was early decisions. Now, we took some risk early on, but they proved to be right. Without knowing the political dimensions or the decisions that might be made related to a timeline for a drawdown, the commanders made the decision, pull 10% of the equipment off your forward operating bases to try and get ahead of the game. And that proved to be successful in that we had a sense that we had maybe too much equipment forward. So again, the leadership came in play there. We were also, I have to admit though, we were lucky in that we were not having to compete with our Army friends as we were coming out of Iraq. Thus, the competition for the locks and the strategic airflow diminished. The transportation that Transcom provided to get us out of country was tremendous. Those lessons learned like that, we immediately captured after our withdrawal from Iraq. And we have already started planning for when the time comes for Afghanistan not to repeat any bad practices, but to use some of the good practices that we learned from that.
Thank you, General. The gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Runyon, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Sir, I just wanted to do a quick follow-up.
Sorry, General, go ahead. Apologize.
You heard General Johnson refer to the Northern Distribution Network. It is going to be key that that Northern Distribution Network allows movement of what's referred to as lethal cargo. You know, today we can only move non-lethal cargo on that network. Fully 60% of our material flows in through the Northern Distribution Network today, but it's only non-lethal stuff. It's food, it's fuel, it's water, it's construction materials. In order to do a withdrawal, an orderly withdrawal out of Afghanistan, we're going to need to, and Transcom's working on it, perhaps General Johnson can talk about it, we're going to need to be able to go out through the north as well as from the south.
Sir, if I may?
Yes.
Absolutely to the point. One of the points of fragility in the Northern Distribution Network is that each of our transit agreements is bilateral. It's individual per country in this chain, in a series of each country. And it's one way right now. And for many reasons, these countries have long memories of what happened in Afghanistan, a couple of decades ago, and are very nervous about the security on their southern borders. So we do not currently have permission from all the countries to be able to come out, whether just to rotate forces or to eventually move out. And even we're working with our NATO partners as well, because some of their units, they're obviously based in Europe, they'd like to be able to rotate that way. So these are the kinds of agreements that the State Department is helping us with, and each country team, to try to find a way for us not just to rotate units, but eventually to be able to plan to move in and out with unlimited equipment, but right now is very restricted.
Well, it's encouraging that you at least have identified the challenges and you're working to, in a joint way, incorporate the lessons. I think that's going to make us stronger as we look towards the reset. Thanks. Mr. Runyon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for your testimony and your service to our country. General Stevenson, you mentioned it in your opening statement that as we move to a reset, which you said typically takes 2 to 3 years, you have a lesser ask in your FY12 budget. I just wanted you to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yes, sir. The amount next year, I believe, is somewhere around $4.5 billion for a reset for the Army, and that is considerably less than it's been in previous years. Two big reasons for that. One is timing. That is when the stuff that's in Iraq is going to be put into maintenance, and the other is the type of stuff that's coming out of Iraq. We have virtually no combat vehicles left, no tanks, no Bradley fighting vehicles, no M113 personnel carriers, no self-propelled howitzers. There's some, but not very large numbers. And those are the big dollar drivers for reset for the Army. Mostly what we have in Iraq today is MRAPs, and they're not nearly as expensive to reset as a tank or a Bradley. But back to the timing issue. If you just consider when we're going to be coming out, and if you look, you perhaps haven't had a chance to see the plan yet, but because it's still coming together. But the plan has us, the 50,000 forces that are there, coming out mostly in the fall of this year, which means they'll end up in Kuwait somewhere around the turn of the year. And by the time we get them on a ship and back to the continent of the United States and then off to a source of repair, it'll be the third quarter when they finally land there. And then they've got to be inducted into a maintenance program. Our depots typically plan their work a year in advance. So they probably won't, most of them probably won't induct until fiscal 13. And that's why it's a timing thing. Mm-hmm. You'll see our 13 request will account for all of that.
Well, thank you. And as we're talking budgets, General Johnson, you know, moving all this equipment, and I think we all feel it in our lives every day, the price of fuel around the world is drastically affecting your ability and your budget constraints. Can you comment on that?
Yes, sir. In the short run, obviously, we probably are the greatest consumer of fuel in the Department of Defense with our Air Mobility Command component. So Air Mobility Command has undertaken some fuel efficiency efforts before this current change in fuel price, because we know we need a smaller carbon footprint and to be good stewards of money. And so what they've done is invested in some fuel planning types of software programs and a way of conducting flights that the commercial industry has taken on in the past and has achieved already 5 to 10% of savings in fuel use. And as well, we're trying to find ways to avoid using air when we can. That's why the surface alternative is a better one. And when you factor in all costs, including fuel, if, for instance, it costs, say, 30 cents a pound to send something by a ship and land, it costs 10 times that. It costs $3 a pound to do it by fixed-wing air. Rotary air is 20 times. And so if we can find some way to get the cost closer to what it would be on a ship or a truck, the way business does, to reduce their costs as well. That's what we're trying to do. There are obviously some efforts with alternative fuels that we've explored. The Air Force has explored using various, whether it's from coal or other alternative fuels in engines to see if that might work. There needs to be a larger, obviously, market for that, for us to be part of it as we go. And then we have a very small R&D budget at Transcom. We try to come up with ways, whether it's low-cost, low-altitude parachutes, or look at other craft to see if there's another way to deliver logistics cheaper, maybe from unmanned vehicles. We're actually looking at a new generation of airships, sort of blimps, if you will, to be, sort of faster ships. Now, they're not slow airplanes. They're really faster ships, and there may be a business case for that in austere environments, especially for humanitarian assistance, to be able to use large amounts of equipment for very little bit of fuel, and without having, port facilities or an elaborate airfield, to be able to do it simply and have some benefit from what's old is new, and to look at those ways and try to be more creative in how we deliver.
Oh, thank you very much. Chairman, I yield back.
Can I add something to that statement, please?
Please, General.
At Defense Logistics Agency, we provide all of the fuel for the services, and today that's about 70 million gallons a month. So the quantity is very, very significant, and we are looking at all possible mitigation strategies. The key to keeping the fuel costs down, though, is we do have long-term contracts. There is an extensive vendor base throughout the world. We provide fuel to a specific location on the ground at a specified price delivered, FOB destination, which is right now just over $3 a gallon. We adjust that price to the services about every 6 months based on actual cost, so that we can, again, try to mitigate the continuous fluctuations of day-to-day pricing. But our long-term contracts and the significant buying power we have across the world lets us buy at a relatively low cost. That final delivery that Michelle talked about is very, very significant in that, though.
Thank you, General. Mr. Ryan has a quick follow-up question before we go to the gentleman from Texas.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. General, I guess either of you can answer this. Last year, I was on the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, and we were talking a lot about how much it actually costs to get a gallon of fuel from wherever it originates to somewhere in Iraq or Afghanistan. If you can just enlighten us on that.
There is a lot of myth and legend about the fully burdened cost of fuel. The Defense Logistics Agency today, the cost of fuel anywhere in the world is $3.03. That's what our delivery to a FOB. Now in Afghanistan, we're delivering to about 14 different locations, and that is the cost to deliver to there. Now there is a challenge that I can't answer how much it costs for a service to take it from there to another FOB out of the 200 plus locations that they may have to deliver to. But the cost of basic delivery to the large locations that we support and supply is $3 a gallon.
The gentlelady from Hawaii had a quick follow-up to that.
Hello, General. Somehow it doesn't seem to logically follow that it would be $3.03 to wherever we want to send it. I mean, isn't there some logistical advantages to being in a particular location? Or more importantly, shouldn't there be an advantage if you're going to a shorter distance that you wouldn't be paying $3.03 whether you're going to Afghanistan or say Hawaii? I mean, there should be some, just logically seems there should be some kind of advantage to that.
There are advantages. Again, the average cost, which is what we charge per gallon to the services, is averaged across all of that, the worldwide fuel requirement. And that is, it is cheaper to certain locations, but they pay an average price. But in Afghanistan today, our contract, again, we get fuel based on a worldwide vendor network from that area. So I know there are no refineries in Afghanistan itself, but we get fuel from Pakistan in certain types that they provide, JP8, and then we provide also through the NDN, through the Northern Distribution Network.
General, I think what the gentlelady from Hawaii is asking, maybe you can get back to us on the record on this, is we understand that you may average it all out and charge a single price, but I think her question is, do we ever get a breakout and see how much it's actually costing to have different areas geographically, because there is a differentiation in cost. And I understand you don't have those figures today, but if you could get back to us with those. I think Mr. Runyon hit a nerve because the gentlelady from Missouri also has a question on that, if we can briefly.
Thank you. Just a real quick question, and I think you may have partially answered it. I was wondering where the fuel is originating that we're using in Afghanistan. So you said part of it is from Pakistan. I just wondered how much are we buying and depending on Russia for a lot of that fuel?
Ma'am, we get a portion from Pakistan. There is a portion of it that is provided through Russia. We get it through multiple different routes. The NDN provides about 5 or 6 different countries through the Caucasus and across that we provide fuel from. Again, our goal is to have it from as many locations as possible to ensure your vendor base is solid.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous about depending too much on any one of those people you've mentioned at this point. I think that makes sense. Thank you.
I have a quick follow-up also. Did you get your, you asked, what's the length of the contracts? You said lengthy. Somebody mentioned lengthy contracts. I just hope we're not tied into contracts for too long a period.
Ma'am, the average contract right now is based on either a 12-month or it could be an 18-month contract with options available to us.
Oh, well, that's not so bad. I was thinking years.
And if you'll bear with us, we have 3 votes. We're going to try to get one more question in, but if you'll just be patient, we'll run over and vote and then come back. Gentleman from Texas.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for the great work that you're doing and for your service. My question deals with, and I know contractors have been mentioned here several times, but my question deals with our reliance on contractors worldwide, and in particular in areas like the Middle East and combat situation. According to our figures, last year we spent more than $200 billion on contractor support. Many of these contractors, I know, fulfill vital logistics roles, and as has been noted, fuel is among one of them, but also maintenance and dining facilities contracts. And the concern that I have is that we may be losing our ability to have our own in-house system of being able to take care of these these kinds of issues. I know that in an asymmetrical, low-intensity conflict, the use of contractors has been an option. Some would argue not a good option, but an option nonetheless. But my concern is that with this reliance, is the military relying too much on contractors, and do we or can we still have the capability to do these kinds of tasks, I guess organically, for lack of a better way to describe it. So in the event of a high-intensity conflict, do our military capabilities, will they be able to fulfill these kinds of requirements? Because we all know that not only do we have the finest military in the world, in the history of the world, but what differentiates us many times from others is the logistical capabilities that we bring to the fight. So can anybody address that?
Yes, sir. I'll take a first shot at it. This is something that I spend a lot of my time thinking about, concerned about, and examining as we structure the Army. We go through a very deliberate process to structure the Army. We run that cycle every 2 years and are about to start running it every year. The short answer to your question is I'm not concerned. I think we're okay. In the specific case of food service that you mentioned, we designed the Army to be able to do what we called field feeding, MREs, and something called a heat and serve ration. We don't have enough cooks to do the kind of food service operations that you might see in a garrison dining facility because we just don't think we need that for wartime. When we get into a position like we are today, where we're in sort of benign environment where you can use contractors and you can set up a dining facility and provide a soldier what we call a ration meal, great, and we'll do that with contractors. But when we get into an area where we're fighting, or we're in major combat operations, or at these combat outposts that you see in Afghanistan, that's all soldiers, that's not contractors.
If I may, just to jump on General Stevenson's comment, the expeditionary nature of the Marine Corps, early on in any conflict, we do maintain and we have this capability, the organic capability you speak of, sir. That's there. We have our appropriate logistics unit to do this organic piece that you speak of. As General Stevenson says, as the theater matures and it gets more stable, I think that's where you see the larger influx of contractors getting to the issue you speak about.
Sir, at the other end of the spectrum of the contracting, TRANSCOM obviously works in partnership with U.S. flag fleets and the commercial reserve air fleet and also in the sea lift fleet. And those carriers are worldwide carriers, are very reputable, and they have networks that help us have economic and transit access in different countries. And also, they provide this surge capability for us that day in and day out would be prohibitively expensive for the taxpayer to support. But our organic fleet can do it. But having that surge capability and knowing if we really needed it, it would be there, the relationship's tremendously important. And then, obviously, there's a concurrent benefit to the flag fleet, the prosperity of the merchant mariners and the ports that support them, and that whole dynamic that goes along with the U.S. flag fleet. So that's TRANSCOM's end, and we appreciate the partnership, but we can handle with the organic fleet as well.
And if you have any other comments, we'll finish these when we come back, but we need to adjourn now or recess now for an opportunity to vote. We'll be back after 3 votes. Thank you.
But beyond that, there is no plan to reduce. In fact, we're actively working to rebuild our preposition stocks in accordance with something we call APS, Army Preposition Stocks 2015. And we're well on our way. I'd say we're probably 2/3 of the way there toward rebuilding. But any reductions we're not even close to a decision on that.
General Panner, I know one of the things we've seen is the Navy's budget has included an initiative that projects about a $4.2 billion in savings by, among other things, restructuring its prepositioned ship squadrons. In your opinion, what are the impacts of readiness of moving this capability to a reduced status?
Sir, that reduced status issue, the Marine Corps does have a concern over it. That particular squadron supports EUCOM and AFRICOM, and we routinely use that in theater engagement and for training exercises. I would suspect the two COCOMs involved also has a concern over that as well. Getting back to John Stevenson's comment, we think what we have right now is aligned properly with the requirements of the COCOM commanders. Now, the issue I earlier brought up, that equipment, while we have some critical shortfalls, in general, the readiness ratings are pretty high. We do need to refresh it from the lessons learned in combat. Thank you.
General Johnson, I know that TRANSCOM structures its force and how preposition stocks are factored in. How would reductions in preposition stocks affect your ability to meet your requirements?
So we're actually in the midst right now of studying the as-is state of preposition materials to see if, in partnership with DLA, if TRANSCOM and DLA could possibly be even more effective in delivering what's there. We don't have a vote in what the content is. Because the services are having the opportunity now to reset and to reconstitute their prepo, the Department saw this as an opportune time to take a look at how it's arrayed to see if we've learned anything about distribution in the last 10 years or so, to see where they are and in what medium, whether afloat or ashore, if they can be presented even better than they are. Because now it's been sort of deemed, as the General said, effective, that they can respond to the plans that they were aligned for. We just want to see if we can do better. But that study is just literally just completing the very first phase to assess what we have. And those are the kinds things that we're trying to take account of being good stewards of how much it costs to move things and store them, but most importantly to be able to support the warfighters in their efforts.
General, I'm sorry. Yeah.
If I could follow up.
Sure.
Something that we have done, and this was done internal to the Army, was to, given what DLA has done in the last 10 years in terms of forward position depots, and General Collier alluded to that, we used to have in our afloat set 2 large container ships, which we spent probably $40–50 million per year each to maintain afloat sustainment stocks. Because of the nature of DLA's distribution of their depots around the world, we believe now that we can position our material in those depots on land and have them in the right places to meet all of the potential contingencies, and won't need those sustainment ships, those 2 container ships that we would contract for as part of the afloat stocks. So there's an example of how we are working with the Defense Logistics Agency to come up with a cheaper way to achieve the same end.
And General Panner, I know that you may have a little disagreement with how the Marine Corps views that as opposed to the Army. What's your thoughts there?
We approach it a little differently, sir. I think you realize when we load our ships out, these are capability sets, and the expectations are that the equipment that we put on these ships can support the war fight in the initial stages of the war fight. As we run these things through our maintenance cycle, we pay particular attention on how we load these ships so they can achieve that mission. So for us, it's not considered a floating warehouse. It is capability, warfighting capability that we can project forward.
And that's something we've just got to keep our eyes on that ball and not miss that. General Collier, in our supply chains now, if you had to point out, do we have any key single points of failure? And maybe the flip side of that, are there places where we have too much redundancy?
Sir, in many of the commodities, the big commodities of food and fuel, we are such a small portion, in medical also, a small portion of the overall worldwide supply chain that we don't have issues with those. Probably the greatest individual chain that we have issues with is clothing and textiles and the American base there. With the continuing adjustments to uniforms and all to support the theaters, we are challenged to have a supply base here in the United States for really the textile industry is probably our most important.
Gentlelady from Hawaii is recognized for, I'm sorry. Ms. Burdell had a follow-up on that.
Well, not exactly a follow-up, but I do have a question. During a recent posture hearing with General McNabb from Transcom, we discussed ship repairs in U.S. shipyards. And to continue and to dig a little deeper into this issue, I understand that the Guam shipyard has had some difficulty with its dry dock. However, I find that it is up, but it is undergoing some repairs now. But the trend of sending ships overseas has occurred consistently even before this event. In other words, they're sending MSC ships to Singapore and other foreign ports. What steps can be taken to address this matter further? And I'm very concerned that we're degrading our domestic industrial capabilities. I think, General Johnson, you probably will be able to answer that. Could you discuss what sort of planning models are taken into consideration when repairing naval or MSC ships? You know, where is Buy America?
And ma'am, I'll probably take the larger portion of this question for the record so I can get you the detail. But in general, the vessels that are staged overseas for a certain period of time, something like over 2 years, and the big Navy can determine to have those repairs done overseas. Those tend not to be the kinds of vessels that attend to Transcom work to do the cargo vessels. As you've had a chance to talk with the commander of Military Sea Lift Command, you've had a sense to know that the $40 million worth of work that we do in Guam, and we do hope that the Big Blue Big Blue dry dock can be back up.
Yes, it is up now.
Yes, ma'am.
I understand.
And so I will have to take for the record the details of that process for you and for your staff to better understand that.
Very good. And another question for General Johnson also, referencing the Defense Personal Property System, DPS. I understand that a new system is in place now for the movement of personal goods during a PCS move. However, I do understand that some in the community of users have raised concerns about the new system. And I also understand that there is a concern this system was developed without adequate input from the shipping community that provides the services. So can you discuss what is being done to improve this and to what extent contractors are involved in the improvements of this new technology?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that question. The movement of household goods is an enormous undertaking for the Department of Defense, obviously, with all the movement of our forces. And the last 2 years have been particularly challenging because with the economy in decline, the trucking industry has laid up several of their vehicles, so their capacity was much reduced. Unfortunately, at the same time, some of the BRAC moves have actually accelerated household goods moves in the Department of Defense, which put more pressure on the industry. To just create more of a perfect storm then, at the same time, we've been developing this new web-based program that actually help with the quality of life for military members in their moves. And we've had 11 different occasions to meet with industry in major forums over the last 2 years, and then the discussions went on before that to try to refine the process. We have over 70% of members of the services, I think, using the DPS now. We've received 30% customer surveys. So of those, 30% have submitted customer surveys, so we can have a sense of how that's working for the military members. There's also a feedback loop with the carriers as well. Some of the complaints initially was that the website was cumbersome, and it was. And we're trying to do better with that. It wasn't as elegant as some of the things that you've used with, whether Expedia.com or Amazon or that sort of thing. And it's meant to be. And so it's improved with the feedback. And as we approach this peak season, this peak move season coming up, our teammates have worked with the trucking industry to come up with alternatives. Even though the normal enclosed moving truck that we're used to seeing is in shorter supply this year, we've come up with agreements for them to use crating and on flatbed trucks that will provide a secure move for the members, but also gives an alternative to industry for them to have business as their business picks up. And we've also, with this program, been able to black out, in the sense of to block out times of peak so that people don't oversubscribe to a period of time when they can't be supported, which is a burden on the industry as well as on the members, and to then phase out the move to make it more smooth. So we think the improvements we've made will benefit both the members and industry. And actually, a side benefit of this is we've saved over $200 million
That's what I understand.
along the way. So that's really been a benefit to the Department of Defense, and makes it a competitive environment for industry. But it's been quite a value for the Department of Defense.
Thank you. Thank you, General, and I yield back.
Thank you. Gentlelady from Hawaii is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, all of you, for being here to testify. You are really probably the unsung heroes because you make things actually work. So having said that, my first question is to Lieutenant General Stevenson. In your statement, you used this word or this phrase, organic industrial base. What is an organic industrial base?
Yes, ma'am. What I was referring to are depots, maintenance depots that are operated by the Army. We have 5. Arsenals, which are operated by the Army. We have 3 manufacturing arsenals. And then a number of ammunition plants and also ammunition depots. And there are a total of 14 of those. That makes up the organic industrial base. And the notion there is that we have a capability internal to the Army to support ourselves in time of war, and so that we're not reliant necessarily on the commercial outside the Army base.
And how much of our needs is the organic industrial bases or depots capable of meeting?
I think, geez, that's an interesting question. I've not really looked at it in that way. Let me say this. We have, by law, we were required to do no more than 50% of our depot maintenance outside the base. In other words, the law says do at least 50% of the depot level work in the depot, organic depots. And we're complying with that. We're actually about 60% in the organic base. Could we do 100%? Pretty close. We probably could.
In particular, ammunition, for example.
Ammunition is much closer. The law doesn't talk about how much of our ammunition must be produced organically. It only refers to the maintenance depots. It doesn't even refer to the manufacturing arsenals, which is something we plan to propose some thoughts about what we ought to have in the way of law for that in the future. But in ammunition, there are no requirements. There are things, though, that we know the commercial industry won't do. Just south of here in Radford, Virginia, we make what's called nitrocellulose. It's the T in TNT.
So can you also tell me then if this is what's ongoing, what's the savings if we were able to go to 100%? And let me just share with you, I happen to believe that if the military can insource basically all of its needs in terms of what we are outsourcing, not to say anything about the private sector, but if we can insource, especially these critical aspects of our needs, that we probably could do it efficiently and in addition to that, at a great cost savings. And I just wondered if there was a cost-benefit analysis done.
There is, and that's exactly what drives us to not use the organic bases. It's a maintenance action that has to occur every once in a blue moon. Doesn't really make sense to keep that capability or to gear up the organic base just to do that small task and then gear back down. It's inefficient. We have another law, besides the 50-50 law that says 50% must be done organically. Another law says we must maintain a core, C-O-R-E, organic capability in our organic industrial base. That is the amount of capability to meet our needs in wartime. And we're very careful about ensuring that we meet that core capability. We can do 100% of our core requirement in our base. To be completely frank with you, today we have some shortcomings there, where there are things that we should have a capability to do in the base that we can't. And there's long reasons for how that occurred. We're working to fix that and ensure that we have complete compliance with the law and can do every bit of our wartime requirement organically, should we have the need to.
And I'm running out of time, but I believe that maybe you can answer this in writing. You know, Secretary Gates has this whole idea of how to save monies through efficiencies. Now, is by any chance any of the operations regarding the organic base part of it? And if not, what exactly or how does his efficiency measures that's going to cut costs affect you?
the organic, everything is subject to being considered in this look at the efficiency of the Department of Defense. And we shouldn't be exempt from that. We should be looking internally to see if we're doing business as efficiently as possible. And the fact is, we can. I mean, there's still cases where there's redundancies that don't need to be, perhaps between the services. And there's been a lot of work to correct that over the years. Centers of technical excellence in one service that the other service can depend upon, and that goes both ways. And then just the way we operate in the base. An example for you. Our arsenals are probably, of our organic industrial base, they're probably the least workloaded. And we have capacity there, untapped capacity. But having untapped capacity in the business, and this organic base is a business, is not efficient. It means you're paying overhead that you don't need to be paying. And so we've got to do a better job ourselves of getting business for our manufacturing arsenals. We're doing some work with that. General Collier can tell you that we're manufacturing small arms parts, weapons parts for the DLA because they've had some difficulties with some of their suppliers. That's perfect work for an arsenal. In fact, it's being done at Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois. We need to do more of that. I sent a note last night to my counterpart in the Air Force asking about bomb casings that they are using a contractor to make for them. We could make those bomb casings at Watervliet Arsenal, and my approach to him was, let us do that for you. The more of that kind of work we can do, we can make our arsenals more efficient.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. As I mentioned at the beginning, deferred my questions. I just have about 3 questions for you. Now, one of them is about counterfeit parts. All of us know that they have the potential to seriously disrupt the DoD supply chain, to delay missions, to affect the integrity of our weapon systems. As you also know, a congressionally requested GAO study on counterfeit parts completed in March 2010 found that DoD is limited in its ability to determine the extent to which counterfeit parts exist in our supply chain because it does not have a DoD-wide definition of the term counterfeit and does not have a policy or specific process for detecting and preventing counterfeit parts. General Collier, what are we doing about that, and how can we address that problem better?
Sir, first of all, we recognize that there's a problem. We don't truly know the depth of the problem and the scope of the problem, but we know it, and it hurts us and it hurts industry. So we have actually formed an organizational effectiveness team led by 2 senior executive service personnel. We've got contracting personnel, we've got legal personnel, engineers, all working together to develop and again work with industry to find certified traceability of parts, certify both the manufacturers and the parts, and we have different ways of doing that. Again, we're very susceptible with those 10,000 automated contracts every day. You have a hard time vetting all of those people that are truly providing those parts. So we're using automation models to determine if things are out of line with either pricing or quality of the parts. And then we're also looking at ways to even DNA stamp parts to ensure that the chain of reliability or certification of the parts is there. Because a lot of times it's not the OEM that's providing it, it's one of the sub-manufacturers way down the line, as complex as many of these things are. And so we have a testing facility. We are working heavily with them out in Columbus, Ohio, that tests for counterfeit. It is one of the priorities that we have online right now.
If you see something else you think we can do to help, please let us know. The other thing the gentlelady from Hawaii mentioned were the efficiencies, and for a better term, we call them just cuts, that are taking place. And I think, General Stevenson, you mentioned everything should be on the table. We don't question that. Here's the concern we have as a committee, I think, though, and perhaps congressionally, that oftentimes these efficiencies or cuts, however you want to deem them, are not being done based on business models that have milestones that you can really measure to make sure that in the long run they are cost savings, as opposed to things that we're just kicking down the road. Do we need to have more business models when we make these decisions, do you think? And how do we go about bridging that gap, I guess, of credibility? Because it seems like more and more we're getting it where somebody's coming and just telling us, well, we had some meetings and we decided, but we never see that analysis. Yeah.
Sir, two thoughts. First thought is, at least in the logistics area, we're getting a vote. It's a bottoms-up offering, not a top-down, cut 10% and you guys figure out how to make that work.
But is your vote based on a business model, or is it based on the fact we've got to cut something and this is what we think is the thing that would be the least painful?
I'm not sure I'd call it a business model, but it is certainly an examination of what we think the possibilities are. And then it's on us as managers to ensure that we deliver the goods and what we said we could do. And shame on us if we can't pull it off. Then we were silly and short-sighted in what we proposed.
But you guys oftentimes have a great mentality, and we salute you for this, but it is that whenever somebody asks you to do something, you salute and say, we can do it. And I've never heard you say, no, we can't do it, which is admirable, but we don't want to put you in that position.
Yes, sir. We do say we can't do things, we just don't do it publicly.
And that's what we're trying to get you to do, I guess. Anybody else weigh in on the business model aspect of what we're general plan? Sure.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and I'll be a little bit more blunt with it, I guess. We are concerned about some of the efficiencies as they are being discussed and the business case analysis that might be behind them. In all honesty, my service, and fair to say Department of Navy has a position that some of these efficiencies we have concerns, not that we can't accept them, not that they're not good ideas, we're just asking for the proper analysis to be done so there's not secondary effects that we'll regret.
And just so you know, this committee is going to help you guys. We're going to try to give you some of that business model analysis so that you don't have to ask for it. But that it's in there so that we know, and I hope that we'll have some stuff to help along that line. Just two other questions that I've got. One of them we've kind of hinted at, and it is in the industrial base. And I know this is not totally your areas, but one of the things that worries me, and I've talked to I think all of you privately about this. You know, when we go back to World War II, and we had to gear up for World War II. We will never be in a situation where our military is capable of fighting long-term battles by itself. I mean, they've got to have private sector and all involved. We shifted manufacturers of arcade games into making munitions and other kinds of things. We're losing that industrial base here as you have to depend more and more on foreign sources to even get the supplies that you need. Does that concern you? And at any time, do any of you take a look at not just how I'm getting the items I need today, be it maintenance or be it items that I have to put in the supply chain, but who's manufacturing them? And if we had to have that intense, long-going conflict, do we have the industrial base, not just for ships, that's important, but for everything that you have to supply to our military?
Yes, the short answer is yes, and probably the best example I can give you is in the ammunition business. We have a very deliberate, detailed industrial base assessment process we use for every munition that we produce. As you know, the Army is the single manager for conventional ammunition for all the services. And we have, I could show you, for every munition we produce, a complete breakout of where every part comes from, where the single points of failure are, and what mitigation steps that we're taking to ensure that in time of war we have the ability to get that subcomponent so that we can produce the munition. We work very hard at that, and we know that we are susceptible to offshore sources, and we've got to have mitigating strategies. In some cases, we buy to keep a vendor in business even though we don't have a need. Because it's so critical
the capability
for the future. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if I could use another example in this area that I'm pretty comfortable with, ground tactical equipment. If you look at what we did with the MRAP since 2007, they were there, industry was there when we needed them. We expended over $30 billion. We delivered in a partnership an item that actually saved lives. When it comes to ground equipment, I think there's many skill sets out there that are transferable, and they're well today, and I think in a time of great crisis, we could pretty well rely on them. When it comes to aviation shipbuilding, I'm certainly not an expert in that area, but my experience with the ground side of the house, I think we're in a pretty good situation.
You know, one of the things we may just need to be looking at, too, I know if you look at plants, for example, that geared up to help do the Kevlar that we needed for some of our vests and all, at times they feel like we pulled the rug out from under them. You know, we asked them to shift, cost them a lot of money to do it, but then we kind of pulled that rug out from under them. And the question I always have, if we do that, what are they going to do next time, you know, when we need them? So it's something that I know you guys are concerned about. We just need to have that conversation about how we support them. General Johnson, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, sir, you've alluded to sea lift and airlift, and obviously that's one of our greatest interests. Even with these airships that we've talked about, there are companies trying to figure out if they have a business case for that type of different vehicle. Some of the testing we do out in the ranges for unmanned logistics vehicles and that sort of thing, it shows a dynamic interest out there. If you're talking about producing in great numbers, though, that's obviously the business of this committee more than for us in transport. But we have found great support when we've tried to look for new ideas. We've found great support from U.S. flag industry and then home-based industry.
Yeah. General Collier, any thoughts? Yeah.
Sir, no. You know, overall, most of the commodities that we support, we have a relatively good industrial base. I said textiles and some of the Nomex and different types of things. You actually said one of them that's very key with the armor protecting materials, and it is a challenge because of our long-term commitment to those types of organizations and what they produce. I think one of the things that the Army has done well is try to look at those and see which of the items that is the item du jour today that we're really going to keep in the system long-term and make sure we do continue to support those versus what we're using in today's conflict and may decide we don't need to keep that long-term within our capability. The other challenge that we have in DLA is to support all the legacy systems along with those new systems coming out, and we lose manufacturers off of those systems routinely also.
Last question I've got for you. All of us, we appreciate so much, as we said at the beginning, your expertise, the experience you bring here, your service to our country. It all comes in with a unique skill set that you bring to the table. All of us, though, go through our days sometime, and we have good days, but there's one thing that just kind of worries us and nags at us. And sometime you wake up at night and that hits you, and we oftentimes say what keeps us up at night. You've heard those kind of comments. What's the thing that concerns you most in what you've seen in terms of our readiness posture that you would say would be the thing that would concern you the most, not just for today, but 5 years down the road or 6 years down the road, if you had to peg that as the thing that would worry you most at night if you had to pick one thing?
Since I was about to answer a today answer, but you took
today is okay if you want to do that.
Well,
or give me both.
The obvious thing, sir, is the CR and potentially the shutting down of the government.
That's a little out of our pay grade. So let's go to one that we can deal with.
But one that sort of Haiti brought to mind. You know, we're getting very, very good at deploying and operating in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's a cyclic thing, and we know how to do it, and it happens almost so smoothly, so by rote. But we got to be able to do that on short notice to other places in the world. And we got soldiers. When we did Haiti, there's some skills that we didn't have because we had gotten rusty at them. And so 5 years from now, you know, we're out of Iraq, we're out of Afghanistan. You know, how are we going to keep those skills? I mean, it just almost makes you cry how competent Army, Marine Corps, other service logisticians are. We've gotten really, really good at this. It's something we haven't done, you know, I mean, before the Cold War, end of the Cold War. I mean, we talked a lot, we practiced a lot, but we didn't do. We've been doing for 10 years. And to keep those skills is how you keep them. How do you keep the soldiers motivated? after what they've been through. That's what keeps me up at night.
It's tough. We found that with NASA when we lost our ability to put somebody on the moon, you know, General.
Sir, if I was going to pick one thing, I think it's this reset issue. I use the analogy, and my folks hate it when I use it, but this pig and the snake is coming. When we get out of Afghanistan, we're going to have this tremendous requirement to reset our Corps, our Marine Corps. I just hope that the American public and Congress will be there when we need them. And as Mitch has said before, we're going to need 2 to 3 years to get this right. And that's coming. And I just hope the will is there to help us when we do start coming out of Afghanistan.
I do too. General Johnson.
Sir, as we look at our responsibilities in the future environment that we're going to face, the idea of going to remote places with austere environments is more and more a reality. Our alignment in the world has been fairly east-west. We find that our presence north and south, and those whether in Africa, South America, or even southern parts of the Pacific, perhaps aren't as robust. And so one of the interests we've taken is to come up with an en-route infrastructure look, an annual look with the other combatant commands to see if where could we fix a road here or a port there so that in future we would be able to go in to do, in a benign way, to go do humanitarian assistance, not necessarily, you know, to do bellicose acts, although we could do that as well. But to fix a road in Suda Bay, Greece, may be a small investment, but it would give us the opportunity to support perhaps even better the activities in North Africa right now. The kind of work we're doing in Guam right now represents that sort of work to make these intermodal nodes as we go. But as we build relationships with other countries, whether Vietnam or others that might give us this presence so that we don't have a giant expensive footprint, but we have a way to respond in the way that General Stevenson alluded to, in ways that we can't anticipate in place, but we can anticipate the kinds of things that might happen in increasingly remote areas.
Okay. General Collier.
Sir, my thought is more along the lines of wearing my service uniform versus a DLA uniform, but it really does go back to more what General Panter said. We have been given the greatest equipment today, and we continue to get full support for any new piece of equipment to support our troops deployed around the world. And I worry about our ability to continue to get that money for the public to stomach us getting that money to reset and recap our equipment so we're prepared in the future. And along the other thing that General Stevenson, I think, said, we have non-commissioned officers today that have no peer anywhere in the world, and it's because of what we allow them to do in the theater. And yet our regulations, when we bring them back here, require officers to do many of those same functions. And how do we keep junior mid-grade NCOs engaged when we take those responsibilities away from them that we fully handed them, including soldiers' lives? How do we keep them engaged and wanting to stay in and do what we need them to do in the future?
Good comments. I promised all of you before that if you needed any other time to correct anything that you said or something we left out, to give you that opportunity. Anybody need anything else or feel that we've left out something that you think we need to put in the record or that you need to go back and reevaluate? Well, if not, we want to, again, thank you so much. This committee appreciates not just you being here today, but your service to our country. And by telling you that, we also hopefully are telling all the men and women that serve under you. And thank you. And with that, we're adjourned.